And a good morning, Birds fans. A now Tuesday get together after a busy weekend for the Philadelphia Eagles, a prosperous weekend for the Philadelphia Eagles. We're here to continue that conversation. The Mac and Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald, both more well rested than we're after the draft. Johnny putting in that many more hours than me in front of my computer screen. But Johnny Mac, I put that much more time in yesterday and went and checked the individual rounds and the team's overall drafts. And the more I look into it, the better the Philadelphia Eagles look.
I know.
Man.
It's annoying. It's annoying to me. Um, yeah, it's tough. It is tough to complain about anything that went on from an Eagles perspective throughout the entire draft. It really is. And I referenced that Peter Schrager reports yesterday about other GMs getting a little bit upset about all the praise Howie Roseman's getting. I'm like, why are you making it so damn easy for him then? I don't know. I don't know what a lot of these teams are doing. All I can sort of boil it down to is again the longer leash Howie has. He has a comfortability factor that most GMs don't have. You and I disagree a little bit on Chicago. I've been hammering them in the offseason. And I'm thinking about it. Ryan Poles can't draft Jalen Carter. Can't. Probably wanted to. I don't know that for a fact. But, I'm trying to be open minded. Probably can't. Probably doesn't feel comfortable enough to do it. Howie does. So that's a big part of it. But yeah, I mean, the Swift deal, I kind of explained yesterday. Detroit put themselves in an obvious situation where they had to get rid of the guy, and you gotta, you're buying high and selling low on DeAndre Swift if you're Detroit. They put themselves in that situation. They clearly identified it. They had to move him. Howie took advantage. Even if you talk about Arizona, Monty Ossenford admitting he made a mistake to the NFL, and Howie's like, well, we want something. And he goes all the way from the bottom of the third round to the top of the third round.
All right, let me touch on each of those things because they all bring up interesting questions. Cardinals, Monty Ossenford. They supposedly self-reported that they went to Roger Goodell and said, oh, it just dawned on us now that we placed the call at a time we weren't really allowed to be able to talk to someone who was prepping for the Super Bowl. We're sorry, and if you think that we should actually pay a price for that, we certainly would be understanding because we were in the wrong. Yeah, that's exactly the way it went down. They self-reported. Please stop it. That no one is buying that weak crap. It's the same exact thing as the NCAA. Oh, the university has self-reported. No, you haven't. They've done an investigation on you. They've got facts against you. You're going to pay a price, but do you just want to get out in front of this and say, yeah, we did it? That's what. Please,
yeah, I get this, but here's how I take it, Jody. I'm not worried about the mechanics of Monty Ossenford sort of self-reporting. You're probably right on that aspect. What I'm more focused on is the Eagles' perspective. Who's the Eagles' assistant GM? John Ferrari.
They've got a couple of them, but
John Ferrari, Alec Halaby. One of them
were
was
either of those guys front and center when they went to the Eagle draft?
Well, everybody was. I think I was in the draft room at some point. I forgot. I was so tired, but they had 57 people in the draft room. But yeah, John was in there. But his history, his background, director of football compliance. He's the football ops guy. He's the guy who knows all the rules inside and out. That's how I look at it. The Eagles are famous for winning outside the margins. So they got this knucklehead out in Arizona, doesn't know what the hell he's doing, doesn't understand the rules. And the rules are I get why people are focused on it in Philadelphia. I'm not talking about the Super Bowl. I'm talking about just the mechanics of the rule. If you interview the guy once, you were allowed to interview him between the Super Bowl, between the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl. You're allowed to, but they didn't interview him. They didn't have a first interview. You could only do second interviews. It's a dumb rule. You could only do second interviews. Because Monty got the job so late, he wasn't able to talk to him for the first interview early in the earlier open window. So therefore it was illegal until after by NFL standards, until after the Super Bowl. And he did it anyway. The Eagles know that. A lot of people, I always go back to Billy Martin. You're a baseball guy. Way back in the George Brett game. I've said to this day, they should have never overturned that. Even though it was a stupid rule, even though it was against the spirit of the rule, Billy Martin deserves credit for keeping that in his back pocket and looking at these stinking dumb rules of backward and forwards and pulling it out exactly when he needed it. I always thought, you know what? That's stinking impressive. Tip your hat to the guy, close the loophole after, and move on. Here's the same thing the NFL will do, I think. Stupid rule. Closed the loophole after. Eagles took advantage of it. Just another example of winning outside the margins. And these guys, Monty Ossenfort, Ryan, all these young GMs, they're out of their freaking league, man. They're out of their league.
Right, and Howie and the Eagles have taken advantage from him. My point on them self-reporting was I just don't believe they self-reported. I believe the Eagles called them on the carpet. I think the Eagles got in touch with whatever compliance officer from the NFL they needed to go, hey, we're pretty damn sure that they made a call that they weren't supposed to make. The league investigated. They copped to it and said, all right, well, now you got to work out a negotiation. And oh, by the way, Howie, when asked about it, well, that was a league decision. Stop it, Howie. It was a negotiation.
I'm the one who asked him. And it said, bullshit. It says settlement. You settled
exactly
with Arizona. Yeah, the Eagles took advantage. On that part, we agree with. I don't even care about self-reporting versus non-self-reporting. I care about them taking advantage of a knucklehead rookie general manager, which they tend to do. And hell, he takes advantage of veterans. Look at Mickey Loomis last year. He got John Robinson fired. Howie doesn't like this, by the way. He doesn't like when people point out that he fleeces people. But he does. He takes advantage of them.
He did in this case, and you're right. I think their assistant general manager is probably the guy who did all the legwork to get that negotiation underway and called for by the NFL, because Howie's got bigger fish to fry than, did Jonathan Gannon or didn't he have a telephone call during Super Bowl?
A Zoom call. Sorry. Who cares?
Well,
it doesn't matter in the long run. Again, Jody, people are saying he wasn't focused on the Super Bowl because the defense played crappy in the final 30 minutes. If Monty Ossenfort got the job earlier, right? He had the first interview round with Jonathan Gannon. He could have talked to him. It wouldn't have been illegal. He could have talked to him between the championship game and the Super Bowl. Shane talked to the Colts between the Super Bowl and between the championship game and the Super Bowl because he already had a first interview. Nobody's unfocused. Nobody's not trying to win a game. I get everybody wants a scapegoat. Take your scapegoat, enjoy it. It's a dumb rule the Eagles took advantage of because they have John Ferrari, who knows all these rules inside and out. And they said, hey, let's take advantage of Arizona.
Exactly.
That's what happened.
Right. That's why I'm giving credit to the Eagles as an organization. Howie probably negotiated the swap of picks in the third round. So I'm sure he was involved in part of it, but unearthing it was probably someone else. So that's the entire Eagle organization. And congrats to them. And shame on the Cardinals for not knowing the rules and making an illegal phone call. And that's why it cost them that pick, those slots in the third round, which allowed the Eagles to take probably their starting safety this upcoming year in Brown. You're right. The Detroit Lions shot themselves in the foot. How do you come out and say, well, he's still on the roster? DeAndre said, well, he's still on the roster. You're alerting the entire world, yeah, we're not going to be keeping this guy. And the fact that the Eagles were able to get him for a pick that they can't make for 2 years, not a 2024 pick, a 2025 pick. Yeah, the Detroit general manager is just overmatched. But I'll give Poles at least this much credit in Chicago. They weren't picking him. You know they weren't picking him. I know they weren't picking him. If they were going to pick him, they would have had the card to the podium in about 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
And taken him. So to get anything at that point, well, now you've got less than 10 minutes, and there's a whole bunch of teams that when you say, are you interested in the pick to take on? There just weren't that many teams that were willing to say yes. There were a whole bunch of teams that said, oh, we're not going to take a chance at 10. He's still too risky at 10. Oh, no, the Eagles were ready. The Eagles were willing. And they didn't have to give up a big pick to get him, but they gave up a pick, which I'm telling you, Chicago probably did not have other picks to choose from. At that point, they know they're getting the player they want at 10. If it's with the Eagles, they waited against any other offers that they had. They wanted to stay put and take the player that they took at 10. I think they did okay. If they weren't taking a player, and I think it's pretty obvious that they weren't taking Carter, then just to drop down one slot and get a future pick for it is not a bad deal.
Well, you're making the best. I will agree in this part. You're making the best of a bad situation.
I wouldn't call it a bad situation, but a situation you don't want to
you and I talked about, and you more so than me, to be honest, said, well, he's not getting by Chicago at 9. So the Eagles are going to have to move
but
up.
I don't have inside information.
No, I know. I'm saying
whether they think the kid is too big a risk or not.
I'm saying I don't believe.
I didn't think he was getting past Seattle at 5.
Yeah.
If the Eagles had done enough work and said this is a risk worth taking, and that was pretty well rumored a year, then I figured that Seattle and Detroit and all the teams between 5 and 10 would have come up with the same conclusion. Apparently, none of them did, and the Eagles were able to take advantage.
But why didn't they? That's my point. Why didn't they? They can't. They can't. These young general I'm giving Ryan Poles an out. Now you have more respect for him than I do. I've been harsh on him, but I will give him an out here because there is no way in a million years do I think that Ryan Poles sits down there and says, you know what? I think the offensive tackle from Tennessee is better than Jalen Carter. There's no way. Now, I don't believe he can take him. I don't believe he can take him because of the situation he's in. He can't take that risk. So that's when I say he made the best of a bad situation. That's what I'm talking about. Then I criticize him even more for taking right over Skoronski, who's right down the road. He takes them over Skoronski, who's the far safer pick. If you're going to be safe, be safe. Be safe. Skoronski's the guy everybody's comparing to Zach Martin, and he's the safest pick in the draft. If you're going to be safe, be safe. So he made the best of a bad situation. He got an extra pick. He fall down a spot. The Eagles wanted to make sure they got the player. He couldn't take the player. He couldn't take the player.
Well, then let me ask you this. Did Howie Roseman overpay?
No, because...
Of course he did. Wait a minute. John, you just said he couldn't take the player. If he couldn't take the player, then he's going to fall to the Eagles at 10. Why give up the draft pick?
Well, the presumption is people are trying to trade up. Other people are trying to trade up for Jalen Carter. Whether that's true or not, and I'll find out eventually.
Right, but don't you have to make that assumption at 5, at 6, at 7?
Well, the Eagles were trying to trade up. The Eagles were trying to trade up to 5. They were trying to trade up higher than that. They were trying to trade up higher than that to get. I already know that they were trying to trade up higher to get Jalen Carter. They also wanted Will Anderson, but that was out the door very, very early. They were trying to trade up to get a difference-making pass rusher. Tyree Wilson, I'm not as sold on. I don't know if he was in the equation because of the foot injury, but they were trying to trade up, and they were trying to trade up before 9. They were trying to get up higher. They couldn't do it. Ultimately, they got to 9. And again, I don't know yet. I'll know somewhere down the line when we get to talk to people off the record what exactly happened. My assumption is, and how he said it on the record, he said, basically we didn't want to worry about it, and we sent the extra pick to make sure to take the surprise out of it.
So Howie didn't know that Ryan Poles couldn't take the player.
Well, he knows Ryan Poles. I don't know. I guess I don't understand your question. He knows
You're
Ryan
saying
Poles.
You know Ryan Poles couldn't take the player. Well, then if Howie knew that, why not just sit there at 10?
Because he thinks somebody's trading up. He thinks somebody's trading into the spot. He knows Chicago's not taking him. If Chicago's taking him, they're taking him. They're just going to walk up and take him. He knows, by the way, they're on the phone.
Agree on that.
He knows when they're on the phone, they're not taking him. He's concerned about somebody else trading up. So he's offering him, and he got them, and he got it for a song and a dance. That may be true. That may not be true. He said on the record, I didn't want to take a chance that somebody else was going to come up. That's why he did it. I can't complain about what he gave up to the Bears. The Bears made the best of the bad situation. The Bears have a young general manager, just as I talked about with Brad Holmes, just as I talked about with Monty Ossenfort. They're getting fleeced. They're getting schooled. They are.
Howie, I come up short of calling it a master class, but he did. He took advantage of other general managers. The Eagles as an organization, Howie's the centerpiece, but I do want to share some of the congratulations to the entire Eagle organization. They had a phenomenal couple of days in the NFL draft. Guy who's been writing about it day in and day out, been reading all his stuff about the Eagles in the draft, is going to join us next. Tommy Lawler from EaglesBlitz.com. He's guest number 1 on this Tuesday, Birds 365.